So, go ahead and look at your teeth in the mirror. Seriously, just think about the money, the time, and the absolute agony you spend on plastic toothbrushes, minty floss, and those terrifying dental drills just to keep them from literally rotting out of your skull. Well, welcome to this explainer, where we're going to unravel a 10,000-year-old mystery about why we actually have to suffer through all of this today.
Okay, I want you to picture something pretty wild. Imagine a 15,000-year-old human skull. We're talking no toothpaste, no electric toothbrushes, absolutely zero dental hygiene. And yet, straight, perfectly aligned teeth with zero cavities. Archaeologists dig up ancient hunter-gatherers all the time, and you know what? Their smiles look like a literal Hollywood commercial. So how is this even possible? Did cavemen just have superior genetics? Were they chewing on some kind of magical tree bark?
Okay, let's dive into this. The short answer is no, there was absolutely no magic involved. Human mouths were actually doing completely fine until we made one massive mistake that kind of ruined our smiles forever: inventing farming. Agriculture didn't just give us cities and bread, it fundamentally altered the microscopic ecosystem inside our mouths and, literally, caused our jaws to shrink. So today, we're breaking down the evolutionary trap that traded perfect prehistoric smiles for soft bread, impacted wisdom teeth, and, yeah, expensive root canals.
Let's start with Exhibit A, the chemical war. To really understand why our ancestors had teeth that would make a modern orthodontist weep with joy, we have to look at what they were actually chewing on. You see, for 99% of human history, if you wanted to eat, you had to hunt it or gather it. This meant a daily diet of wild game, tough roots, fibrous plants, raw nuts, the whole shebang. But when agriculture swept the globe about 10,000 years ago, that shifted dramatically to things like boiled grains, mushy stews, and processed bread. The contrast here is incredibly stark. In a very, very short evolutionary time frame, we basically traded intense crunch for soft mush. Now, that tough prehistoric diet had two major protective features for our mouths. First off, it required massive physical effort just to chew. Because these ancient humans were processing tough, fibrous materials all day, their food actually acted like a natural toothbrush, literally scraping plaque and food debris right off their enamel as they ate. And second, the complete absence of refined carbohydrates and sugar. I mean, wild, ancient fruits were absolutely nothing like the hyper-sweet, engineered fruits you see in supermarkets today. They were small, fibrous, and honestly, barely sweet, because their diet lacked easily fermentable sugars. Dangerous oral bacteria simply had nothing to feed on. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the introduction of our villain. You see, the hunter-gatherer oral microbiome was highly balanced, dominated by harmless bacteria just living off proteins and complex fibers. But basing a diet on grains, that introduces a non-stop flood of carbohydrates. When you chew bread or porridge, your saliva breaks those complex carbs down into simple sugars. And there is one specific bacteria that absolutely loves sugar: Streptococcus mutans. Before farming, this bacteria was just a minority player that could barely survive. But suddenly we gave it an all-you-can-eat buffet. As it gorges on these agricultural sugars, it multiplies like crazy, overtakes the helpful bacteria, and pumps out this destructive shield of acid as a byproduct. And it's this acid that directly strips the protective enamel right off your teeth, creating cavities. The historical skeletons actually tracked this shift perfectly. Look at this data. When populations transitioned to farming, cavity rates in human skulls absolutely skyrocketed, from less than 1% to over 10% in just a few generations. To put that into perspective, it was an absolute overnight catastrophe for our teeth. But believe it or not, cavities were only half the problem.
Which brings us to Exhibit B, the spatial crisis.
So farming also fundamentally altered the physical shape of our faces. Think about your braces, or maybe your friend's braces. You've probably heard the explanation that your teeth were simply too crowded. But from an evolutionary standpoint, let's just pause and ask a logical question. Why on earth would nature design 32 adult teeth that simply do not fit into a modern human skull? Well, the truth is it didn't. Our teeth aren't too big, our jaws are just too small.
Let's break down the biomechanics here. Intense childhood chewing on the tough hunter-gatherer diet acted like a literal physical workout for the jawbone. Bones aren't just static scaffolding, they're living tissues that respond to stress. So when a child spends years processing tough meats and fibrous roots, that mechanical force sends a signal to the jawbone to grow wider, thicker, and stronger. This robust growth historically created plenty of room for all the teeth to erupt perfectly straight. But soft agricultural food? That requires almost zero chewing power. Without that rigorous developmental workout, the human jawbone simply stops growing to its full potential.
So the crucial point is this. Over centuries of eating soft, boiled foods, our jawbones shrank, becoming much smaller and more recessed. But the genetic blueprint, the deep code controlling the actual size and number of our teeth, stayed exactly the same as our rugged, hunter-gatherer ancestors.
To really picture the chaos happening inside our gums right now, imagine trying to fit all the furniture from a massive, sprawling mansion into a tiny little studio apartment. It's a complete spatial disaster. There is simply not enough square footage for the layout nature provided.
Let's walk through exactly how this painful reality plays out, step by step. First, due to a lack of mechanical stress from soft foods when we're young, your jawbone fails to reach its full evolutionary size. Then all 32 adult teeth attempt to erupt into this incredibly cramped space. Finally, the last teeth to arrive, your wisdom teeth, completely run out of room. Because they show up last and run completely out of real estate, they get trapped under the bone, become impacted, and, as many of us know, cause agonizing infections.
And that leads us to our final section, the modern evolutionary mismatch.
And this brilliantly illustrates our big picture conclusion. An evolutionary mismatch is basically a phenomenon where modern symptoms are caused by a radical dietary or environmental shift that our bodies just never evolved to handle. Cavities and crooked teeth, they are not inevitable human traits, and they aren't genetic flaws. They are direct modern symptoms of the fact that our food remains far too soft and way too sweet for the ancient mouths we inherited.
Now, obviously, we can't exactly abandon modern society and run off into the woods to chew on raw roots. But understanding this completely changes how we view dental health. Every single time you brush your teeth, floss, or even just limit your sugar intake, you are actively fighting a manual battle against 10,000 years of dietary mismatch. So the question is, until our genetics finally catch up to this soft modern world, are you ready to keep fighting this manual battle every time you look in the mirror?